Shalom, more praise, how about Shemel Shaddis? The Blonde Apology J Message. I'm now Allah coming at you with the video. Let's get right to it. So I'm going to start from the paragraph I ended last time. Judeans were not the only headache of the shrinking Seleucid Empire. In the northeast, the Parthian tribes of the semi-nomad Iranians in what is now Turkmenistan expanded southwards and westwards. So let's go to that map real quick. Remember it said the northeast of the Seleucid power, or in other words, the northeast of the Seleucid Empire. Look at the northeast. See this map of the Seleucid Empire, or in other words, the Seleucid Persia. See how it says Seleucid Persia 200 BCE? And what do you see in the northeast? You see it says Ragai, Rhagai, Nisa, Nisa, and right there in the green you see Parthian Kingdom. Now remember, it said what? It was northeast. That's northeast, right? And it went west, and it went south, and it went west. Meaning, it went down. It went from here. Down will be south and west. Pay attention to these nations here. It went south and then it went west. What do we see? It went south from where it was and it went west. It expanded to this region of land. Them same countries that we just looked at in the last map. It says 75 BCE. So in time, it expanded. We went into that before, how the Seleucid Empire had moved their capital to Antioch. When they moved their capital from this region over here by Babylon, further this way. And look at where it says, look, Seleucid Kingdom. See that? It says Seleucid Kingdom. So it basically swallowed up the whole kingdom. And when they moved their capital from this region over here to Antioch, they could no longer truly monitor those other vassal states or satellite kingdoms. In other words, the other satellite states or vassal states, in other words, the other kingdoms that they had under their dominion, they couldn't truly monitor them because they were further away from them. So they couldn't really monitor them. And eventually in time, they grew greater in power and greater in number and were able to take them down. The Seleucid Empire was shrinking because the Seleucid Empire took over the regions of land that Antiochus and Hasmonean once ruled. Because remember, we went into First Maccabees, we spoke about First Maccabees, the first chapter. And in First Maccabees, the first chapter, it tells you what? Evils multiplied in the earth. They're talking about the wars of the Diadochi. Which Diadochi, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Diadochi. It means successors. Those are talking about Alexander's successors. The various generals that reigned under Alexander. And how they fought with one another for a period of about 40 years. About 39 years, I believe to be precise, but it was about 40 years that they fought. Roughly 40 years. And they fought with one another for the remains of Alexander's kingdom. And the Seleucid Empire took over the regions of land that Lysimachus and Antiochus once ruled, that dynasty, those dynasties. Took it over and took their regions of land. Then eventually in time, the Parthians took them down. The Parthians began to overcome them. And in 139 BCE, Demetrius II, the Seleucid, was defeated and even captured by the Parthians. Read about Demetrius II a little bit. I'm just going to give you a little information about him because he's not what this show is about. Demetrius II, called Nicator, which means victor, was one of the sons of Demetrius I Sata. His mother may have been Laodice V, and was the case with his brother and Antiochus VII Sidetes. We're going to get into him. Demetrius ruled the Seleucid Empire for two periods, separated by a number of years of the captivity in Hyrcania and Parthia. First from September 145 BC to August 138 BC, and again from 129 BC until his death in 125 BC. His brother Antiochus VII ruled the Seleucid Empire in the interim between his two reigns. So Demetrius II is talking about Demetrius Nicator, which means victor, and he was the son of Demetrius I Sata. Let's keep reading. And like we mentioned, he was captured by the Parthians. Very soon, the Parthians, led by Mithridates I, controlled much of Iran. This is from Wikipedia. Mithridates I, also known as Mithridates I the Great, was the king of the Parthian Empire from 165 to 132 BC. So this was during that reign of Demetrius II Nicator. During his reign, Parthia was transformed from a small kingdom into a major political power in the ancient East. The ancient East, let's get that real quick, just a little bit. The ancient East, or the ancient Near East, is known as like the Middle East. Areas like Mesopotamia, which is like modern Iraq, southeast Turkey, southwest Iran, northeastern Syria and Kuwait, ancient Egypt, ancient Iran. These are the areas of the ancient East or the ancient Near East. Okay? And the ancient Near East begins with the rise of Sumer. See right there? Top of your screen. And a lot of stuff, the ancient Near East is considered one of the cradles of civilization. It was here that intensive year-round agriculture was first practiced, leading to the rise of the first dense urban settlements, and it goes on to social stratification, empire, religion, alphabet, code, astronomy, mathematics, the wheel, and it mentions here you see ancient Egypt and so on and so forth. So let's go back. He first conquered Aria, Margiana, and Western Bactria from the Greco-Bactrians sometime in 163 to 155 BC, and then waged war with the Seleucid Empire, conquering Media and Antiocus in 148-7 BC. Alright, jump down. In circa 140 BC, while Mithridates was fighting the nomadic Saka in the east, the Seleucid king Demetrius II Nicator attempted to regain the lost territories. Attempted to regain the lost territories. When he went to Demetrius II Nicator, did not mention that he reigned for 2 periods. He wanted to regain certain territories. But we'll get that real quick. We're gonna go into the Maccabees with that history. So let me go back. It says the Seleucid king Demetrius II Nicator attempted to regain lost territories. Initially successful, he was defeated and captured in 138 BC, and shortly afterwards sent to one of Mithridates I's palaces in Hyrcania. Mithridates I then punished Elymas for aiding Demetrius and made Persis a Parthian vassal. Continuing on, and it said Mithridates I had punished Elymas for aiding Demetrius, and Elymas, Elymas, was a city known for its riches and wealth. You can read about that in 1 Maccabees, the 6th chapter, which we're not going to go into that. Okay, keep reading. Continuing on. Apparently, Judeans liked the Parthian expansion. Right, so it said the Judeans liked the Parthian expansion. Let's read into that a little bit. Why? Now we're going to go into this particular time period of the Parthian kingdom. So we're not talking about the time period of, Cyrus. We're not talking about that time period. Because that's before this time period. That's hundreds of years earlier. When these kingdoms fell, it wasn't like the kingdom just fell and they were just wiped off the planet. These different civilizations continued to exist, but they just weren't reigning. They just weren't that main stewards. They just weren't that superpower that they once were. Because you had many different. Because for example, Alexander's gone by this time. Alexander's long dead. What we're reading right now, Alexander been dead for 100 some odd years. Alexander died 300 some odd BC. We in 130 something BC. So Alexander's been dead for 2 centuries, but guess what? The Seleucid Empire is still around. And now you see the Parthian Empire taking them down. So don't be dismayed. Like, wait a minute, brother, hold on. You just said this and Parthian kingdom that. Well, I'll get to it real quick. Check this out. This is from a website called Any Iranian Religions, a brief history of Jews in ancient Iran. And it gives you a large history. You see it's mentioned Nebuchadnezzar right here. I'm not going to read that. Top of your screen mentioned Nebuchadnezzar. It mentions Darius. And it gives you different time periods. See, up here you've seen 721 BC. You see 680 BC, 539 BC with Cyrus. But we're not talking about the time period. We're talking about the time period of the Parthian Empire. They may say, wait a minute, brother, hold on. But aren't they all from the area of Iran? That area in the Middle East? Well, yeah. The major difference is this. The major difference is that the Parthian dynasty, they reigned from Parthia, which is known as Turkmenistan, which is in the northeast. And then you had the Medes, which reigned in the west, Media. And then you had the Persians, which from Persia or Fars, Fars, which is like the southwest. Let me get you a map real quick. Here's an ancient map. Right here. See if I can find it right here for you. Persis or Fars, that's the southwest. Media right here. That's the west. And then you got Parthia. That's northeast. This is the region of Turkmenistan. Let's look at more modernized. Same thing. Parthia, Media, Persia. You see Scythian right there. So you see that same area. And this is the area of this is the whole entire area where the Persian Empire once reigned. But the Median dynasty was in the west. The Median Empire was in the west. The Persian Empire was in the southwest, and the north, and the Parthian was in the northeast. The northeast. Okay. And if you look at this map here, that's all basically like Iran. Turkmenistan is a little up here, but that whole entire region of land, the whole area where the Parthian kingdom was, where that whole Persian Empire ruled. This whole area you see right here, Turkmenistan, this whole area here that I'm basically highlighting is the whole area which they ruled. So them previous maps that you saw were all the areas that the Persian Empire reigned. They didn't just rule in just Persia. They ruled, that's that whole region that you're seeing in the previous maps. It is that the Parthian kingdom was when the Parthians was in power. Okay? So that was a particular region in that area of land once ruled by the Persian Empire, but the Parthians were the ones that was in kingdom, that was in power. Okay? It's like, you see, let's say you got Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Turkmenistan, which is where the Parthian kingdom ruled. This whole region was once reigned by the Persian Empire. But once that particular area of Persia was no longer in power, in time, what eventually happened? Other kingdoms, other vassal states that was once in subjection to them, they began to rise up in power. So now this region, the area that Persia once ruled as a whole, other countries that they once ruled are now rising up. It's like if you live in New York, you got Brooklyn, the Bronx, Manhattan, Queens, and Staten Island, the 5 boroughs. The major place may be Brooklyn. That may be the Brooklyn, New York may be the Brooklyn Empire. But then once they fall, eventually you got another empire called the Bronx Empire, the Bronx Kingdom. That was a region that was once ruled by Brooklyn, but once it fell, they began to rise up. So don't get dismayed, don't get confused. These kingdoms rose and they fell, and in areas which they once ruled in time rose up into power. So let's keep going. This here is talking about Jews when they were under the Parthian dynasty. See? When they were under the Parthian dynasty. That's why it says a brief history of Jews in ancient Iran. In areas of Iran, but in this particular area of Iran, when it was ruled by the Parthian dynasty. That's why I showed you that map. And then it says Sasanian dynasty, but this is all Iran. But let's keep going. Let's read. After the invasion of Iran by Alexander the Macedonian warlord and the collapse of the Achaemenid Empire, the later dynasties, i.e. Seleucids and Parthians, followed the same policies. Iranian, Arameans, Babylonian, Greek, Christian, and Jewish temples were present in all the major cities. The Jewish chronicles mention the Iranian history. So when you go into the Book of Chronicles, mention the Iranian history of the Parthian period as one of the best in their history. Centers of Jewish life in the Parthian Empire were situated in Mesopotamia, Nisibis, Nahadia. Jewish chronicles state that they enjoyed a long period of peace and maintained the chronicles, like the history, in other words, when you chronicle the history. Because if you look at the word chronicle doesn't always have to mean the Book of Chronicles. Look at the word chronicle. What does the word chronicle mean real quick? A factual written account of important or historical events in the order of their occurrence. Record in a factual and detailed way. So you got to understand how it's written. Sometimes you may say, in the Chronicles of so-and-so and so-and-so. But you may be like, I looked at the Book of Chronicles is not there. Well, the Chronicle is a record. So Chronicles don't necessarily have to mean the Book of Chronicles. It can mean 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah. Okay, so continuing on, it says, the Jewish chronicles state that they enjoyed a long period of peace and maintained close and positive contact with the reigning dynasty. You can read about that in the book of Ezra. Remember when Cyrus had let the children of Israel rebuild the second temple? Remember when they passed a law saying that the other nations couldn't mess with it, so we was rebuilding the temple? Remember that? This is proved, among other things, by the participation of the Jews in the rebellions against Trajan, the Roman Empire, in Mesopotamia, 116 CE. In addition, the Jews took an active part in organizing the silk trade, an advantage they owed to the evident support of the emperors. No later than in the 2nd century CE, a representative of the Davidic origin called Exarch represented the Jewish minority at court and also carried out functions as a political administrative nature. It says religious persecution of Jewish rebels in Palestine by the Romans in 135 CE. Remember, we around that time. We're going to go back to it and show you. Religious persecution of Jewish rebels or Israelite rebels in Palestine by the... When you think of rebels, you're thinking of what? Maccabees. Right? Maccabees. They were like rebels, right? Weren't they rebels? Religious persecution of Jewish rebels in Palestine, or Israelite rebels in Palestine by the Romans in 135 CE also brought many Israelite refugees, it says Jewish right there, into the Iran under the Parthian dynasty patronage. See? Philo and Flavius Josephus, the famed Roman historians, have documented the relations between Jews and Iranians. On the whole, religious conformity was not demanded as a means to safeguard the reign. We could read about this in the book of Ezra. They allowed us to keep our customs. We was able to get back all of the gold, all of the riches that was stolen by Nebuchadnezzar to rebuild our temple. The ruling principle was always the advancement of reliable groups and communities and punishment of disloyal ones. The Jewish communities proved to be loyal and reliable, and as a result experienced a time of unprecedented prosperity and cultural religious creativity. And it says those rebels were brought as refugees. It brought refugees into Iran under Parthian dynasty patronage. What does it mean to be a patron or patronage? To the support given by a patron, the power to control appointments to office, or the right to privileges. Okay? Now, when you go into the book of Ezra, obviously, like I stated before, Ezra is talking about a different time. Ezra is like 500 some odd BC. So this is 135, around this area, 135 BC. So this is hundreds of years later. But I just mentioned what we read in the book of Ezra as a reminder. I'm not going to go into it. Y'all brothers could go into that on your own. You know? Acts 2:1. And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, which was 50 days after the Passover, which Pentecost, is meaning 50. Like a pentagram or pentagon, has 5 sides. They were all with one accord in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit, and began to speak with other tongues, as the Spirit gave them utterance. And they were dwelling in Jerusalem Jews, devout men, out of every nation under heaven. And when this was noised abroad, the multitude came together, and were confounded, because that every man heard them speak in his own language. And they were all amazed and marveled, saying one to another, Behold, are not all these which speak Galileans? And how hear we every man in our own tongue wherein we were born? Parthians, and Medes, and Elamites, and dwellers in Mesopotamia, and Judea, and Cappadocia, and Pontus, and Asia, Phrygia, and Pamphylia, and Egypt, and in the parts of Libya about Cyrene, and strangers of Rome, Jews and proselytes, Cretes and Arabians. We do hear them speak in our tongues the wonderful works of the Most High. These are all Israelites. Because remember, why would it mention Pentecost? Huh? Look what it said. It says, see if I can find it. They were dwelling in Jerusalem Jews, devout men, out of every nation under heaven. So it mentioned all of the nations that they came from. One of the nations they came from was Parthia. One of the nations that they came from was Parthia. They came from Parthia. We just went into the history of Jews and Iran. Religious persecution of Jewish rebels in Palestine by the Romans in 135 CE also brought many Jewish refugees into the Iran under the Parthian dynasty patronage. Philo and Flavius Josephus, the famed Roman historians, have documented the relations between Jews and Iranians. On the whole, religious conformity was not demanded as a means to safeguard the reign. So when the Parthians were in power, religious conformity, in other words, the people that they ruled over, didn't have to conform to their religion. Religious conformity was not demanded as a means to safeguard their reign. So in order for the Parthians to safeguard their reign, to maintain their rulership, religious conformity was not a necessity. It was not a necessity for the people that they ruled over to conform to their religion. That's the reason why when you go to Acts the 2nd chapter, they were able to go from Parthia and all of them different lands to Jerusalem to keep the Feast of Pentecost. They didn't say, no. You got to keep our religion. You can't go and do that. No. So now you're getting more history now. Okay? Now you're getting more history now. All right? And the Parthians was in power for a long time. The Parthians was in power for an extended period of time. It wasn't no 5 or 6 year reign. Now I'm gonna say, hold on real quick. Now if you look right here, it says CE. Now CE is Common Era, like BCE is before Common Era. So CE would be 135 CE would be like 135 AD. So what we read in Acts was actually before then, because this is the Acts of the Apostles. So this is before this particular time period. Somebody say, wait a minute, brother, what you're saying is true, but that's 135 CE. What you read in Acts is decades before that. That's true. That's true. But it's still talking about the Parthian Empire. So how long was the Parthian Empire in rulership? Okay. Parthian Empire. Right here. 247 BC to 224 AD. There you go. There you go. So even though what we read on that website said 135 AD, because wait a minute, 135 AD, it said that they was able to accept there wasn't religious conformity wasn't necessary. Yeah, but it wasn't necessary before then either, because the Parthian Empire had been reigning for a long time. So even before then, okay. I don't know if the screen just jumped back to this or not, but you must say, hold on, wait a minute, brother, wait, stop. But during Acts, that was the time of the Roman Empire. So how's the Parthian kingdom going to be ruling from 200 some odd BC to 200 some odd AD, or 200 some odd BCE to 200 some odd CE? If what you read in Acts, the Roman Empire was in power. Simple. Because when you read right here, what did it say? It mentioned Trajan, the Roman Empire. And it said 116 CE. Because when you go into the history of Trajan, who was the Roman Empire, Trajan had wars with the Parthians. So it wasn't like, oh, look, we're the Romans, we're in power, and nobody come up against us. No, they still had wars with other nations. As a matter of fact, check this out real quick. Trajan's Parthian campaign was engaged by Roman Emperor Trajan in 115 against the Parthian Empire in Mesopotamia. The war was initially successful for the Romans, but a series of setbacks, including wide-scale rebellions in the eastern Mediterranean and North Africa, and Trajan's death in 117 ended in a Roman withdrawal. So you still had them fighting other kingdoms that was trying to maintain their power. Okay? So just in case anybody got confused and said, wait a minute, brother, hold on. It said they didn't need religious conformity to maintain their reign. All right, cool. But that's 115 CE. What you were reading the Acts of the Apostles, that's like 30, 40 some odd AD and on. So that's before what you read in that document. Yeah, but the Parthian Empire was in power from 200 some odd BC to 200 some odd AD. Okay, but wasn't the Romans in power when you read the book of Acts? Yeah, but guess what? The Parthian Empire was in war with the Romans. Romans still trying to take them down. It wasn't just sitting there just ruling. Nobody was coming up against them. Let's go back to that article. Then it says, apparently Judeans like the Parthian expansion. Members of the Hasmonean dynasty frequently had Iranian, more specifically Parthian names. Hyrcanus, Rakan, Herod, Herodes, Warad. Those were Parthian names. So Hyrcanus, who was the son of Simon Thassi, that you read about in the book of Maccabees, which therefore means John Hyrcanus was the grandson of Matthias Maccabees. All right? He had a name Hyrcanus. Why he had a name Hyrcanus? It says a Iranian name, but let's go into the history of that a little bit. Oh, but before I get there, let me read this real quick. Almost forgot about this. This is from a website called AIAmilitarypanel.org. Cultural Property Training Resource, Iraq. It says Parthian and Persian rule 150 BC to AD 633. Like many Mesopotamian dynasties before and since, the Seleucid crumbled in the face of a challenge from the east. This was the Parthian kingdom circa 100 BC, 224 AD. So some say 100 because you got to remember you had different rulers in Parthia that came into power. So when you went on Wikipedia before, it said 200 some odd, 200 some odd AD, now it's saying 100, but it all depends on what time the period they starting from. A person may say, oh, the Greek Empire ruled from 312 BC to so and so and so. Well, 312 BC was the beginning of the Seleucid Empire. Alexander was in power since 300 some odd BC, decades earlier, years earlier. Okay? So it depends what year they starting from. Now right here it says founded in Turkestan or Turkmenistan. So that's why that one is saying circa 100 BC. And including the area southeast of the Caspian Sea. Parthia began to extend westward, threatening the Seleucids. We read that in the map earlier. We showed you that in the map. The struggle over Mesopotamia intensified between 161 and 140 BC as Mithridates I, we read that, right, conquered the entire Iranian plateau. And by 126 BC, Mesopotamia was in Parthian hands, except for a brief period of Roman rule under Emperor Trajan, circa 117 AD, during the lengthy wars between Rome and Parthia. By the time Parthian rule was secure, Babylon was a virtual ruin. But the Parthians did restore the city. Okay, that's pretty good much right there. It is right there. Scroll down a little bit. Check this out. Now, hold on. We're going to get there real quick. I just want to go right here real quick. It says, and even right here it tells you, the Emperor Trajan reigned 98 to 117 AD, and Septimius Severus, which we know is a Jake, 193 to 211, both briefly seized the region and battled again and again to capture and hold Mesopotamia. So they were still reigning, still warring. Okay? And right here it says, the Roman Empire achieved its greatest geographical expanse in 116 to 117 AD, and with the invasion of Parthia by the Emperor Trajan and the capture of Assyria with the cities of Seleucus on the Tigris, Babylon, and Ctesiphon. Yet Trajan lost most of these territories before he died in 117. Trading successes including Septimius Severus. Okay. It says 145 to 211, but right here it says 193. But it all depends on what period they're starting from. So you got to look deep into history to get into that. I'm not going to go into that here because I'm already going into something that this show is not even about. Matter of fact, so I'm going to leave it right there anyway. But the point I wanted to get to was up here. It says, beneath a relatively small Parthian aristocracy were Greek, Persian, Iranian, Macedonian Jews who chose not to return to Jerusalem under Cyrus, and Arabs, following of a wide variety of religious faiths. Okay? And these are all different shrines, different gods, and different reliefs, and so forth. But that's the point I want to get to right there. It says, beneath a relatively small Parthian aristocracy were Greek, Persian, Iranian, Macedonian Jews who chose not to return to Jerusalem under Cyrus. So these are people who are part of the Parthian aristocracy. These different groups of people that we just mentioned. And it said Jews, right? And they chose not to go back to Jerusalem. Now, what does the word aristocracy mean? What is an aristocracy? Or an aristocrat? The highest class in certain societies, especially those holding hereditary titles or offices. So that's what an aristocracy is. Now, remember we mentioned Hyrcanus, right? You had Jews that took on certain Greek names, like Hyrcanus. Check this out. The name Hyrcanus means one from Hyrcania. The Hyrcanian Sea was the ancient Greek name for the Caspian Sea. Hyrcanus' name reveals his father's favorite monarch from the Hasmonean dynasty and his lineage from the dynasty. But here's the point. But that's on Wikipedia for Flavius Hyrcanus. But that's just to give you an idea of the Hyrcanus. Hyrcanus means one from Hyrcania. And the Hyrcanian Sea was the ancient Greek name for the Caspian Sea. So the ancient Greeks called the Caspian Sea the Hyrcania Sea. But let's keep going. And this is from a book called The History of Jews in Hyrcania. I was trying to find a website, but I managed to actually find it in this book right here. Okay? But when you look it up, it says the word Hyrcanus, it says Hyrcanus, and then it says an Iranian aristocratic name. There you go. It was an aristocratic name. So, what's aristocrat again? Aristocracy, the highest class in certain societies, especially those holding hereditary titles or offices. So, he was from a high class in society. He was the descendant of the Maccabees. And they took on that name Hyrcanus. Alright, let's keep reading. And you can look at the word Hyrcanus, I believe it's 2 Maccabees 3 and 11. But it's spelled with an I instead of a Y. Okay? The Y was known as I Gracia or Gracia, Graca, which means Greek eye. So that would more than likely have to be the reason why it's spelled with an I. But let's keep reading. It says the vassal dynasties in Armenia, Cappadocia, and Pontus were threatening the Seleucid rule in Syria and northern Mesopotamia. We read about Cappadocia, we read about Pontus in the book of Acts, the 2nd chapter. Was threatening the Seleucid rule in Syria and northern Mesopotamia. The Parthians reestablished Iranian rule in Iran proper, which is known as Greater Iran. The Romans were a threat. We read about the Romans. We read about them fighting against them. In 133 BC, the Seleucid ruler Antiochus Sidetes, known as Antiochus VII Sidetes, who was the brother of Demetrius II Nicator, who was the son of Demetrius I Dosada. So the son of Demetrius I Dosada had a son named Demetrius II Nicator. That's the same one that we read earlier that fought Mithridates I and was captured. Well, this is his brother, Antiochus VII Sidetes, called the last great Seleucid king, went to reconquest the former Seleucid possessions in the Iranian East. See that? Demetrius II Nicator. Who was his brother? Right here. Antiochus VII Sidetes. That was his brother. And who was his father? Demetrius I Dosada. So Demetrius I Dosada had a son named Demetrius II Nicator, and he had a brother named Antiochus VII Sidetes. Now when you go back, what did it say? In 133 BCE, the Seleucid ruler Antiochus Sidetes, which was the 7th, it doesn't call him the 7th here, so you got to do more research. You got to go outside of that website that you may be reading, called the last great Seleucid king, went to reconquest the former Seleucid possession. Went to reconquest, take it over again, conquer it again. We know re means back or again. Conquest is the conquer, so to conquer it back or to conquer it again. Can you read about this in the scripture? 1 Maccabees 1 and 15. 1 Maccabees 15 and 1. Moreover, Antiochus, son of Demetrius, that's what we're reading about, Demetrius the 7th Sidetes, the king sent letters from the isles of the sea unto Simon the priest and prince of the Jews, and to all the people, Simon Maccabees. The contents whereof were these: King Antiochus to Simon the high priest and prince of his nation, and to the people of the Jews greeting. For as much as certain pestilent men have usurped the kingdom of our fathers, those different kingdoms, some different kings that we mentioned, Pontus and Cappadocia, and different nations, have usurped the kingdom of our fathers, and my purpose is to challenge it again, to reconquest, that I may restore it to the old state, and to that end have gathered a multitude of foreign soldiers together, and prepared ships for war. My meaning also being to go through the country, that I may avenge of them that have destroyed it, and many cities in the kingdom desolate. Then let me read here. By the time Parthian rule was secure, Babylon was a virtual ruin. So these different places was all messed up because of them wars. All right, and we know Babylon was a part of that where the Seleucid Empire reigned. Now, therefore, I confirm unto thee all the oblations which the kings before me granted thee, and whatsoever gifts. So this is when the Parthian Empire was building up steam and taking over different regions of land. Now, therefore, because the map I showed you, but it said when Parthia basically took over the whole Seleucid Empire, that was 75 BC. This is 100 some odd BC, like 130 some odd BC. So this is like 70 years before this map right here. All right, before this map right here. So this is about 60 some odd years. Almost 70. All right, it says, where were we? Okay. Verse 5. Now therefore I confirm unto thee all the oblations which the kings before me granted thee, and whatsoever gifts besides they granted, I give thee leave also to coin money for thy country with thine own stamp. And as concerning Jerusalem and the sanctuary, let them be free, and all the armor that thou hast made, and fortresses that thou hast built, and keepers in thine hands, let them remain unto thee. Real quick. Because remember, he said, all of the oblations which the kings before me have given thee. When you go right here to First Maccabees 13th chapter, you go to First Maccabees 13, and I'm gonna go right here. It's a lot of stuff I can give, but I'm gonna go right here. Verse 33. First Maccabees 13:33. Then Simon built up the strongholds in Judea and fenced them about with high towers and great walls and gates and bars and laid up victuals therein. Moreover, Simon chose men and sent to King Demetrius to the end he should give the land an immunity, because all that Tryphon did was to spoil. Unto whom King Demetrius answered and wrote after this manner: King Demetrius unto Simon the high priest and friend of kings, as also unto the elders and nation of the Jews, sendeth greeting. The golden crown and the scarlet robe which ye sent unto us we have received, and we are ready to make a steadfast peace with you, yea, and to write unto our officers to confirm the immunities which we have granted. That whatsoever covenants we have made with you shall stand, and the stronghold which ye have builded shall be your own. And for any oversight or fault committed unto this day we forgive it, and the crown tax also which ye owe us. And if there were any other tribute paid in Jerusalem, it shall no more be paid. And look who are meet among you to be in our court. Let them be enrolled, and let there be peace betwixt us. Thus the yoke of the heathen was taken away from Israel in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. Okay? Then the people of Israel began to write in their instruments and contracts in the first year of Simon the high priest, the governor and leader of the Jews. So when they wrote contracts and different things, they will write in the first year of Simon the high priest, the governor and leader of the Jews. So his reign, in other words. Okay? All right? And now I was talking about Diodotus Tryphon, Diodotus Tryphon, Tryphon. That's the Tryphon it's talking about. So basically, like, there was an allegiance between the Seleucids and the Jews. So it says, I give thee also coin money. Okay. It says, coin money for thy country with thine own stamp. So money with your own stamp on it. And as concerning Jerusalem and the sanctuary, let them be free, and all the armor that thou hast made, and fortresses that thou hast built, and keep us in thine hands, let them remain unto thee. And if anything be or shall be owing to the king, let it be forgiven thee from this time forth forevermore. Furthermore, when we have obtained our kingdom, we will honor thee and thy nation and thy temple with great honor, so that your honor shall be known throughout the world. In the 114th year went Antiochus into the land of his fathers, at which time all the forces came together unto him, so that there were few left with Tryphon. And it said 130, what was it at? The 103 score and 14th year. 103 score and 14. So what's 100? 103 score is 60. 14 is 174, right? Now that 103 score and 14th year, what's that talking about? First, what's empire we talking about? The Seleucids, right? Which began 312 BC. So the 134th year will be 312 minus 134. Hold on one second. No, 103 score and 14. 312 BC minus 103 score and 14. 100 plus 3 score, which is 60 because the score is 20. Plus 14, that's 174. So 312 minus 174 gives you what? 138. So what we just read is around 138 BC. Is that true with Antiochus the fourth Cities? Let's see. Antiochus the seventh Cities, I think it's at the fourth, the seventh, nicknamed Cities, from Side, a city in Asia Minor, also known as Antiochus the Pious, was ruler of the Hellenistic Seleucid Empire, who reigned from July August 138 to 129 BC. He was the last Seleucid king of any stature. After Antiochus was killed in battle, the Seleucid realm was restricted to Syria. So boom, there you go. And that restricted to Syria reminds me of that map. But the Parthian Empire basically took over the whole map. And there was the Seleucid Empire on that one little side, Syria. But 138 BC, that's accurate. Because remember, That was the Seleucid Empire. The Seleucid Empire reigned when? 312 BC. So the 103 score and 74th year. The first year would be 311. The 100 year would be 212. So the 103 score and 14th year would have to be what? 174 years later, which would be 138. Let's go back. Continuing on, it says in 133 BCE, the Seleucid ruler Antiochus, called the last great Seleucid king, went to reconquest the former Seleucid possessions in the Iranian East. Reconquest. He wanted to conquer it again. Go back to 1 Maccabees 15th chapter. Supported by a Judean army under the Hasmonean prince John Hyrcanus, who was what? The brother, who was the grandson of who would be the son of Simon. But he was killed at the Battle of Ecbatana in 129 BCE. All of the eastern territories were then recaptured by the Parthians. The Maccabees were free again, and the Armenians began their expansion in central Anatolia, bordering on Syria from the north. Okay, let's read on. Having begun as the leaders of the traditionalist party, it called them traditionalist party because talking about the Hasmoneans. In other words, the Maccabees. They called them the traditionalist party because they were keeping what? The traditions of their fathers. The Hasmoneans developed rather quickly into typical Hellenist dynasty. In 96 BCE, the Sadducee Hasmonean king Alexander Yanai opened a bloody 8-year-long civil war against his more pious Pharisee opponents while using Greek mercenaries. Okay. It says the Pharisees can be seen amongst the Ironized Jewish groups of the Second Temple period. Mr. Boyce considered the possibility that the very name of this sect means Persianizers. So it's said that the Pharisees means Persianizers. Although there are really many problems with such an etymology, it seems to me a very plausible suggestion in a metapoetical sense. Josephus, after all, characterized this sect in the following way. It mentioned things like, when they determine that all things are done by fate, they do not take away the freedom from men of acting as they think fit, since their notion is that it has pleased the Most High to make a temperament whereby that he wills is done, but so that the will of man can act virtuously or viciously. Read on, it says they also believe that souls have an immortal rigor in them, and that under the earth there will be rewards or punishments according to as they live virtuously or viciously in this life, and the latter is to be detained in an everlasting prison, but that the former shall have power to revive and live again. On account of the doctrines, they are able greatly to persuade the body of the people, and whatsoever they do about divine worship, prayers, and sacrifices, they perform them according to their direction, and so much that the cities give great attestations to them on account of their entire virtuous conduct, both in their actions of their lives and their discourses also. In other words, the beliefs of the Pharisees, but of these Jews, they call them Pharisees or Persianizers, because when you go into the history, the Iranian groups of people, they had believed in Zoroastrianism, and they believed in the resurrection and fate and things of that nature. But guess what? We believed in resurrection too. We believed in fate as well. So they say, let's call them Persianizers, because their religion, like us Persians, it's like us Persians' religion, our so-called religion. Okay. But that's a whole nother thing. And since we were not told that this is a description of a Jewish sect of the Second Temple period, we could be led to believe that the passage speaks of Zoroastrians, maybe even of those belonging to this or that Zoroastrian heresy. So that's what it could really have been. Called them Persianizers because their beliefs were similar to the beliefs of the Persians. Not that they got it from them. And we're almost done with this, so it's going to be one more part. I thought this would be the last part, so it'll be one more part. It'll be 44 minutes in. So I'm ending here. I'm going to say, oh, praise Yahweh, Shema Shah, double line to GMS. I hope you learn something. Shalom.